Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this special presentation, Reducing Debt Crisis Stigma Through Peer Advocacy. My name is Michelle Sloan-Jones, and I'm the Chief External Affairs Officer for MMI. I'm joined today by an esteemed group of colleagues, two consumer financial health experts who have worked extensively with Americans facing financial instability, as well as several MMI clients who have experienced and overcome debt crisis themselves. I look forward to introducing you to them during our time together today. First, I want to start with a quick rundown of our agenda. Thomas Nietzsche, who is MMI's Director of Media and Brand and a former financial counselor himself, will provide us with some background information on the stigma that surrounds debt and why this topic is so important to financial wellness. Next, we're going to take a look at the approach that MMI has taken to addressing those barriers and stigma around debt and share some of what we've learned, as well as some of the successes that we've had. Finally, and this is the most exciting part, we are going to have a panel discussion with 4 of our MMI peer advocates, which will be moderated by MMI's Learning and Development Program Manager, Jay Makaka. For those of you who are joining us via Zoom, we welcome your questions via the Q&A feature, and we will answer them at the end of our presentation today. With that, I will turn it over to you, Thomas.
Thanks, Michelle, and hello, everybody. I'm really excited today to share what's been a significant portion of my work over the last year. It's been really rewarding to me personally and beneficial to our agency at large, and of course, ultimately to all the communities we serve nationally. So let's dive in. A 2018 survey conducted by the financial firm Capital Group found that people are less likely to want to talk about their finances than politics, drugs, and racial issues. The survey indicated men are less likely to seek advice from a financial advisor than women, which is certainly supported by our client profile here at MMI, which certainly skews female. When asked about topics that are too taboo to discuss with friends, respondents overwhelmingly indicated it was those that are connected to money. So household earnings, retirement savings, debt, and inheritance. Meanwhile, politics, drug use, and racial issues were considered significantly less taboo. And many of these respondents said that finances were none of either other people's business or were simply just too awkward to talk about. Since we know debt reduces disposable income and folks' ability to save, and since debt management is an area of expertise for MMI, we really wanted to focus on this areas where we can have the greatest impact on our communities. So next slide, please. Estimates of the exact number of individuals with debt problems who have sought help vary, but one study we found that only 8% of those who report needing debt advice have actually sought it out. So there appears to be a large group of people who may be suffering from the consequences of debt challenges and need advice, but who have not taken any steps towards accessing that help. From our own surveys, we found that only a small fraction of those who have paid off high debt are willing to share their financial journey publicly, around 4%, so very low. But why is this? So after looking at the research and examining our client feedback, here's what we found. You'll see on this next slide, several academic journals have supported the notion that these are some of the leading barriers for people seeking help for personal debts. Lack of confidence, lack of knowledge, feelings of embarrassment and shame, feelings of moral failure, or feelings of incompetence. As we comb through these comments and reviews that our clients have left for us, we began to see evidence of these themes in our own clients' words. And this next slide shows one example of this feedback that really sums it up. The client said, "The first call was scary. I felt depressed, embarrassed, and that I had failed myself. The MMI rep that took my call made me feel really good. He actually had me laughing and totally took my fear and low opinions of myself and turned them around. He made me feel that I can do this, I had a friend, and that I'm going to be okay. So together he helped me pull up my bootstraps in March." And this is Sarah. You can see more of her story at the short link there, moneym.org/Sarah. So if we can work to reduce and remove these barriers for potential clients to connect, we can begin to gain access to the 92% of people in debt who aren't yet comfortable connecting to us for help, as the study showed earlier. Of course, the next question for us was, what do we do with this knowledge? So to respond to this insight at MMI, we developed a logic model to reach people facing debt stigma and implemented a strategy to reduce it. First and foremost, we realized the need to create and maintain a robust cohort of former clients who are willing to talk openly about their experiences. And this is really the critical piece to all this work. We call these clients peer advocates, and I'll talk more about the recruitment process here shortly. Secondly, we'll focus on placing these peer advocates in media stories, leveraging our extensive network of media contacts and growing new relationships, as well as exploring social media influencers as well. As part of this process, we agreed to tell stories that connect medical and disaster debt to credit card debt. We do this for a couple of reasons, primarily to help reduce perceptions of personal failure and culpable control, since credit card debt is especially stigmatized in our society. We also pledge to deliver our insights in forums like today's to encourage our partners to engage with our peer advocates and talk about this important issue, as well as explore how to create confidential forums where our clients can find encouragement and a sense of community from each other. And finally, we agreed to make client confidentiality a major marketing feature in order to reduce stress and anxiety for those who are considering engaging with us. So if they feel confident that the conversation is only going to be between them and their counselor, they'll be more likely to reach out and engage. By taking these actions, we can reduce the barriers we identified, increase the number of people seeking help to manage their debt crisis, and decrease the negative impacts on households and communities at large. So with this concept in place, we knew the biggest challenge would be finding clients willing to be our ambassadors. That's a problem that we've experienced for a very long time, is just spreading the good word. So we began the recruitment process by contacting about 3,000 of our clients who successfully completed repayment of at least $25,000 on our debt management plan during the year 2021. We sent an email appeal with a short survey to request their participation and learn a little bit more about their experience. And after doing this send, about 4% of these clients responded, which we really feel speaks to the prevalence of stigma and shame, even among people who have successfully overcome large amounts of debt and put it behind them. So ultimately, as this next slide will show, our efforts produced a cohort of about 126 peer advocates in 38 states, with representation in 20 of the top 25 media markets in the United States. These peer advocates range from their late 20s to early 80s. They come from very diverse backgrounds, and some have repaid as much as six-figure debt, increasing their credit scores by as much as 200 points. Of course, these facts make them a perfect fit for financial health human interest stories. The map here shows our current coverage of MMI peer advocates by state within 6 months of launching this program. These ambassadors greatly enhance our reach by providing us with real-world examples of the impact of our work. And especially in today's pandemic world where Zoom is the norm, as we see here today, this dramatically improves our ability to engage communities across the country through local earned media, since of course, more local stations are willing to do Zoom interviews and our clients are spread out all over. So we immediately began promoting our peer advocates in the media, and within several months, we had nearly a dozen placements, including stories in major markets like Houston, Atlanta, Las Vegas, and Tampa. Several of these stories were rebroadcast or syndicated in other markets, multiplying their reach exponentially. Our peer advocates have also been engaged in other ways, however they feel comfortable, like focus groups, user experience research, and agency accreditation interviews, like with COA, the Council on Accreditation. Our Tampa area peer advocate, Jennifer Myers, was central to a dramatic $100,000 debt repayment story promoting MMI services and was ultimately selected as the NFCC Brighter Financial Future Award winner last year. So I'd like, if we can cue her video up, I'd love for us to take a look at that if you've not already seen it.
Card balances plummeted 17% during the pandemic, but a new study shows nearly half of Americans are willing to take on more debt this year. Taking Action reporter Jackie Calloway shares the story of a Clearwater woman who found herself drowning in debt and what you can do to pay down your own balances.
For years, Jennifer Myers led the good life. It included trips to Vegas and the mountains.
And that's how we were paying for it, was every time was credit card.
Along with the purchases of designer handbags and expensive bikes.
If you want something, just get it.
Luxuries financed by a dozen different credit cards. some with interest rates above 20%.
Discover, Sam's Club, TJ Maxx, and
How much did it add up to?
it was it was 100,000.
How did that make you feel?
I was in tears. I was crying.
During the pandemic, credit card balances fell 17%. But creditcards.com found Americans this year have an urge to splurge.
44% of Americans told us that they're willing to go into debt during the second half of this year for non-essential purchases.
In Jennifer's case, she turned to the nonprofit Money Management International for help.
We are able to consolidate, much like a debt consolidation loan, but without creating a new loan. We're able to consolidate those monthly payments and lower those high interest credit card rates down to around 7%.
Set us up on a 5-year program to pay the whole entire debt off.
In Jennifer's case, Money Management International negotiated lower interest rates and put her on a payment plan.
Everything's zero balance.
Last month, 4.5 years after she signed up for debt help, Jennifer made the final payment on her $100,000 credit card balance. How does it feel to be debt-free?
It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. It's a whole burden lifted off of me.
It could take decades to pay off several high interest rate credit cards making just the minimum payment. Now you can try negotiating down the interest rate on your own or turning to a nonprofit debt consolidation company like Money Management International. And we've posted that information at abcactionnews.com. I'm Jackie Calloway taking action for you.
Thanks. So unfortunately, Jennifer couldn't be with us here today, but we have several other peer advocates who Michelle will introduce shortly. So as a result of these peer advocate media placements, we've been able to detect a significant increase in counseling during the months that these stories aired. For example, we saw a nearly 3-fold lead over our control markets in 2 of the cities where we had significant coverage in July and October of last year, Houston and Tampa. And the best part is once we've developed the relationships with local media and made their job easy by providing data, the consumer, and the subject matter expert, they're very likely to work with us again. We've seen this play out in several markets, and we're very excited for what lies ahead for our peer advocates in these markets. The strategy has proved so successful that we've made an intentional move to focus our efforts on local broadcast media going forward. As you can see here in the green, we've more than doubled our broadcast stories in 2021 over 2020 after starting the peer advocate program about halfway through the year. We expect to see an additional lift this year. While this means we've reduced our share of other types of media here in blue, we found that many of these other stories were not focused on our core services and did not produce the same results as local broadcast peer advocate stories. Again, it really can't be overstated how critical our peer advocates have been to these efforts, and I'm constantly amazed by their bravery and transparency as they help us break down these barriers and lead others to find a path to success. With that, I'll turn it back to Michelle to introduce the real stars of the show, MMI's peer advocates.
Thank you, Thomas. Yes, it's now my pleasure to introduce our panelists. And as we get to that, Thomas, what you just outlined, that work has just been incredible to watch unfold over the past year. And I know that what you presented today represents a tremendous amount of work that was done on the part of yourself and so many others here at MMI. We know the puzzle pieces really start to fit together when you create the space and the time to draw these kind of connections. And we have seen the results of this really with increased counseling, increased successful outreach in the markets that you mentioned earlier. So now I'm going to turn to our panelists that will be moderated by our Learning and Development Manager, Jay Makaka. Jay is joined by Jackie Upshaw from Nevada, Joanne Lee from Indiana, Juan Pinon from Texas, and Mark Wilkins from California. Each one of these people are former clients of MMI's and successfully completed their debt management plan. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you again for serving as a peer advocate with MMI and for your time here today. This just would not be possible without your engaged participation. Jay, take it away.
Good morning / afternoon, everybody. I'm in Atlanta, so it's 12:17. Technically it's afternoon here, but good morning, afternoon. I'm very excited to have our peer advocates and be a part of this conversation, because I don't know about you all, but money was not something we talked about. And when I grew up, it was kind of taboo. You don't talk about income or debt or all of those things. It was very much a behind closed door conversation between only the people that absolutely needed to be there. And so I'd like to hear from you. I'll start with you, Miss Jackie. When you had your first call with MMI, I know they probably dived very deeply into your financial circumstance, but what was that call like when you first spoke with a counselor here at Money Management International? Miss Jackie, you're still muted. You might have to unmute. We can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me?
There
Okay.
you are.
Unfortunately for me, it was my second shot at doing this debt management. I had previously did it before, maybe about 20, 25 years ago. So I kind of knew what to expect, but it was still having that conversation with someone to help me navigate any changes had from the previous years, what to do and exactly what was it going to take to be able to to just get rid of the debt completely.
Did it what feelings were coming up for you? Since you had already had an opportunity to speak with a counselor previously, what feelings were coming up for you during that conversation, Miss Jackie?
Well, of course, I was kind of feeling kind of let down because I let it happen again, and I knew what the pitfalls were. But circumstances, got me back into that case again. But I was just I felt really good to know that I knew there was somebody there to help me navigate this. So I wasn't feeling like super depressed, just a little bit, because the fact that I did get back into that situation again.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Miss Joanne? Did you have some of those similar feelings, kind of? Miss Jackie used the word depressed. I don't know if that directly applies, but did you have some similar feelings that first conversation?
Oh, definitely. I was feeling really hopeless and depressed and overwhelmed, and I think I had like a very heavy weight on my shoulders for forever before I even made the call.
And so how did that how did it change as you went through the process of debt management, and then when you came out successfully on the other end of it? How did your feelings change?
Well, the initial phone call that I had with the MMI rep, I would say it completely changed my life and my outlook on my future, because I felt like I could actually pay off the debt. Like, that weight on my shoulders could be lifted off. And it left me with so much hope, and I had a plan, and I could start planning not only to pay off my debt, but also prepare me for retirement as well, which
Mhm.
is something that I could not even imagine starting to think about before I had that phone call with the MMI rep. And during the whole process, anytime that I had any questions, when I called the MMI customer service line, someone was always willing to help me and explained in very great detail exactly what I needed help with, which was amazing, because honestly, I've never been able to talk to anybody about my financial questions or problems or anything like that. So it was kind of like having a therapist at the same time. But at the end, when I was able to finally pay off all of the debt, I felt like that huge weight had been lifted. And from then on, like, I've been able to take care of myself, not only physically, mentally, but also financially for my future too. So it's been a great experience.
You know, it's so interesting because I will say that we had this conversation previously when Thomas and Michelle and I were talking, and it's like you never know how much weight you're under when it comes to debt or your financial circumstance until like it's lifted off.
Yeah.
Juan, was that the kind of the same feeling for you? This weight had been lifted off from you?
Oh yeah, actually felt like a miracle because I've gotten into debt several times, and um, and it's very true. It's kind of embarrassing to admit, um, in a way, weakness or not knowing how to control oneself. It's embarrassing
Yeah.
because we do it on our own. We get ourselves into debt, and it's embarrassing to talk about. But one day I talked about it with my older sister, and I didn't know, but she also successfully completed the MMI program. And so she recommended it to me. And I asked if it was one of these credit uh, businesses that help you fix your credit, or was it how much did I have to pay? I had all these questions.
Yeah.
I was kind of not trusting who was MMI, what is it about? But once she told me it was a nonprofit and it worked for her, and she kind of gave me an overview of how it worked, I actually drove from McAllen, Texas to Houston, and this was before COVID, and met with an MMI counselor in person. I was a little nervous. It kind of felt like going to the doctor's office, but it was fairly simple. They broke it down for me, and they gave me a plan forward. I was a little bit in disbelief, like, is this actually going to happen
Hmm.
in a few years, into the future? I'll actually be debt free. Is it possible? And so I stuck with it, and I stuck with the payments, and over the following months, I began to understand more and more how it was working and that it was possible. And yeah, it felt, um, this last year, once I was debt free, it's awesome. And I just wondered how come I wish I would have known about you all sooner. And again, going back to that stigma, my sister, we always talk frequently, but it wasn't until I brought up the issue of myself being in debt did she share with me her debt experience. Like it was never something that came out of her to say, hey, by the way, how are your finances? You
Yeah.
know, if that would have happened several years ago, I would have gotten into the program sooner and been out of debt sooner. But overall, this is something that needs to get out there, and also along with the discussion of that, these finances or being in debt or talking about your finances should not be taboo. It should not be something that we should be embarrassed about. We're humans, we make mistakes, and it's something that should be a topic of discussion with anybody and everybody, all ages. And but overall, it's been really good. I feel free. It's good to get paid and know that I don't have to take a chunk of my paycheck and pay towards high interest rates. I actually save now, and I love MMI was awesome. I highly
No,
recommend it.
the interesting thing, see, I'm from Texas. So when Juan said he drove from McAllen to Houston,
Oh yeah.
I know that ain't going next door now. That's some commitment.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
I was because what my sister told me, it just sounded too good to be true, and I said I have to drive there in person, and I want to see it with my own eyes. I want to talk to somebody in person, and because I had a lot of mistrust. And so, but once I went in there, it was simple. The environment was friendly. They answered all my questions, and I was a little nervous, like a little mistrust, but overall, I drove away there and I was like, whoa, that wasn't too bad. And I was happy I went in person. So I didn't mind the drive.
So now let me ask you, Mr. Mark. Now, we've heard a couple different, I was feeling depressed, I didn't know. And a lot of times in my line of work, a lot of the clients that we deal with, they don't know what they don't know. And that kind of on its own creates a level of stigma, or the aspects of you don't talk about money. It kind of re-engages that and makes it even harder to start those conversations. Did you have some similar experience when you first called MMI of, like, that deep down gut feeling, I don't want to be talking about this, but I kind of know I got to, but I don't want to? Did you have that?
Yes, I did. First of all, you hit it right. You hit the nail on the head when you said, the idea of money. Money. When I grew up, money has always been something that's supposed to be private. You don't tell people what you make. You don't tell people what you owe. There's a whole thing about keeping up with the Joneses, where you actually a lot of people will spend money to keep up with people that are their friends, so they think that they're big or they're equal or whatever. And what ends up happening is they go into debt. That's kind of like what happened to me. Before I got married, I was like, I had no problems with debt. But once I got married, my wife had this thing where we had to keep up with these other people that she knew, and the other people she knew were better off than we were. And we got like $186,000 into debt. And I remember the first time that I called MMI, it was like you said, I knew I had to do it. And the first time I called, I think that the person I talked to, they were kind of like telling me, well, let me know exactly, why I should do it, why I should get involved with MMI, and why I should worry about paying off my debts.
Well, and I think that's a perfect segue, Mr. Mark. Thank you for that. One thing that we have heard from each of you, Ms. Joanne, Ms. Jackie, Mr. Mark, and Mr. Juan as well, is that, money is just something that we don't talk about. Juan talked about how his sister was the one who told him about MMI, but it wasn't until he, started a conversation that the topic of overcoming debt even came up. And so help me understand from each of your perspectives. I'll start with you, Ms. Joanne. How you're really kind of breaking down some barriers by speaking so openly about your financial journey. What has that been like for you, going through this process? Of course, you've come out, you've completed your debt management plan, but now you're a peer advocate. You're kind of taking it 11 steps further. What has that experience been like for you as a peer advocate?
Well, I'll definitely say that it hasn't been an easy experience, because coming from an immigrant family, my parents were the first ones here. They're first generation to immigrate to the United States, and we come from a very long line of not talking about financial issues, or like any issues really, but especially financial issues. So we really didn't talk about any kind of debt. And at one point, my parents actually went bankrupt too, but they didn't make it known to us for a very long time. And we had no idea, 'cause we were younger too. But it's to that extent that we didn't talk about financial issues. And for me to, dive into this program and then come out becoming free of the financial stress and debt that I had before, I felt like a really strong need to get this kind of conversation out there, especially for immigrant families too, because we have no kind of financial education or any kind of plans or any kind of planning when it comes to finances. So I feel like, it's been a crazy experience, but a very, very much needed one.
I was just having a conversation with a colleague of mine who was born and raised in Mexico. And it was just so interesting, some of the financial concepts that I take for granted because everybody here knows what they are, like credit card debt or mortgage or student loan. You know, I just assume everybody knows what those things are. But when you're dealing with someone who was raised in a different financial system,
Mhm.
we treat money very differently here than you would in several other countries. Then it I think that probably does add another layer of stigma around money, because you don't, it's not just I don't want to talk about money, is sometimes I don't really know how money works. And then
Mhm.
that becomes a whole nother thing. Thank you so much for that, Miss Joanne. I didn't even think about that, and it reminded me of my colleague. Miss Jackie, how has it been for you being a peer advocate? You, like our other advocates, have completed your debt management plan, and now you are again taking it so many steps further by not just completing it and being debt free for yourself, but talking about it openly. How has that experience been for you?
Oh, it's been great. Because this time when I went through the program, I had been retired for maybe about 6 months. So I really wanted to get my finances together.
Mhm.
And now my sister, who just retired last year, I talked to her about this, and she has a lot of debt. So I did talk to her, and she did ask me about how the program worked and everything. And I did, talk to her. So she hasn't joined up yet, and she's like one of those stubborn ones that she doesn't like change. And I don't constantly bring it up to her, but periodically I give it up because she loves to use her credit cards. And I know she has a lot of debt. And now that she's retired, I explained to her, this is going to be hard to be able to pay this debt off without that extra income. You're living off a reduced income. So, because of what I went through, I do talk to her periodically about that, because I have three sisters, and one of my other sisters she makes a lot of money and she spends a lot of money. So she's always coming around with this, you know, this this attitude like, oh, I can do this. And sometimes she tries to keep up with her, just like what Mark said, his wife tried to keep up with, the people around him. My sister will try to do that with my other sister. But I explained to her, she has that money. You don't. So when she comes around and we go out to eat and she want to take the bill, hey, you go ahead and pay for it. I'm keeping my money in my pocket.
Come on
So
here. Come on
yeah,
here, Miss Jackie.
yeah, so I'm learning to be able to manage, and this is the first time in a long time that I have a really nice savings account. And that wouldn't have happened without this program.
Don't it feel good?
Yes. Oh my God. To be able, and I mean, because like right now, I need to buy a new car, and my credit score is like through the roof. I'm almost at 800.
Don't it
So
feel good?
yes,
See,
yes.
and you know, the interesting thing about all of your stories and the stories of the clients that I've spoken to, those that some of which that I counsel myself, is for so many of us, it feels like we've been doing the same thing so long that we don't realize something different is possible. Like
Exactly.
I think Mr. Mark, you were the one saying that you have been living off credit cards for so long. For some of us, it feels like, well, that's just normal. That's how, we get by every month. Has that been your experience, Juan? If we, just living paycheck to paycheck or using credit cards
Yeah.
or perhaps having bad credit, or all of those things just become your norm? Was that your experience?
Yeah, it's kind of like how we touched on those subjects earlier about talking about race or politics or drug addiction. I mean, just the simple fact that we are comparing debt to those type of touchy subjects,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
credit cards are powerful. It could become an addiction, like the video we seen earlier.
Yes, it can.
We want something and we swipe the card and it's instant satisfaction, and we don't, we kind of become numb to the consequences. And so when I was struggling to make the bills, I would use my credit cards and get by another month and get by another month until I was drowning in debt and years had gone by, and I was like, oh no, what do I do now? You know, it's just kind of similar to Joanne. My parents came from Mexico, and we weren't really taught um, a lot of things about finances other than work hard, go to school, save. It was kind of like a simple recipe that was working for my parents. But as for me, I was Americanized, you know. I wanted the Nike gym shoes and to go to the mall and buy all these things. And over the years, luckily, I studied electrical engineering, then got my master's in business. So it was embarrassing for me that I was making more money than my parents, and they had only finished the sixth grade, but they had more money than me, and they were not in debt. So on the outside, it sounded like a success story. You know, I made it. I got educated. I got the really good job, but I lacked in financial discipline or financial understanding, and I got myself in debt. And so it was difficult to share that with them. You know, it was embarrassing having to ask them to lend me some money so I could get through the month. And but in the end, luckily, I found MMI and was able to break the routine, the reckless routine. And so um, I don't know. I wish more people would know about this, like regardless of your background or age or educated or not, it doesn't matter. Credit cards or not handling your finances well can harm you. It doesn't matter who you are. And but you know, luckily there is solutions. You know, it's a lot of times we just don't know what do we do, where do we go, who do we talk to,
Yeah.
you know, and kind of time passes by, and in the meantime, we just stick to what we've been doing the past years is using one debt to satisfy another, and it's like a never-ending cycle, you know?
You know, my big mama, she would say, "You robbing Peter to pay Paul." Y'all ever heard that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep,
Even
heard
though,
that.
and then she would add the back end. She'd be like, "And you ain't got a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out." Excuse me. Like, I'm getting deep in my roots. And but there is a
Yeah.
very good question in the chat box. It is from, I won't say who it's from. Well, I mean, we can all see who it's from. But the question says, "What do you think was the key message that convinced you to seek MMI assistance, or was the key that a specific individual influenced you?" I want to start with Mr. Mark. Like,
Okay.
what was the kind of the thing that said, "Okay, let me make this phone call"? You had been going along for so much, built up an amount of debt. What is like the linchpin that said, "Okay, let me call him"?
I would say precedent, and here's why I'm saying that. I see, the thing is, what you guys probably don't know about me is I was a teacher for 36 years. So
Thank you.
I used to teach my students about debt and debt management, credit, and all that stuff you were talking about. That wasn't taught in schools, but I taught it in my classes. So I was used to doing that. I had never been in debt before I was married. I taught my wife, because my wife came here from another country. She didn't know anything about money. I taught her how to use credit. Now, here's the bad part about it. I taught her, I taught her how to manipulate the system. If you could have a whole lot of debt, but if you concentrate on paying it off and keeping your bills, at least making the minimum payments, you could have a really high credit score. I mean, when she was in here's what I was gonna say. I put her into debt management. I got her into debt management with MMI first. Okay, she had been in there for 4 years and she paid off everything that she owed. So that was good. And the reason I got her in there was I don't know if have you heard of Susie Orman?
Yeah.
I was on her show. So what happened was I was $186,000 in debt. I wrote to the Susie Orman show and I said, I know I'm going to get on this show. And they made me the featured guest. I was a featured guest for the whole half hour, whatever it was. And my wife refused to come on. But after she saw herself on Susie Orman, she decided she would go into MMI. And so she went in and she was successful. So when I needed to go, because I was trying to keep up with her, because when she was in MMI, she couldn't pay anything. So guess who ended up paying everything? Was me. So then I said, well, that was a successful program. So now I'm going to go into MMI. And that's how I got it.
Wow.
Any other questions?
So like, sidebar, real quick sidebar, like I'm having mute button issues. So if
Okay.
I'm not talking, like if I'm talking and y'all can hear me, just wave at me. But I will say, what I heard you say, Mr. Mark, is there is a difference between what you know and what you understand. I tell people this in training all the time. There's like knowing how credit works and then understanding your own financial circumstance and how to apply all that knowledge in real life.
Mhm.
And it sounds like that might have been kind of at play for you, is being able to teach other people about credit and debt management and all these things, and then being able to apply these same principles to your life. It kind of, did it feel like you were kind of unlocking that Super Saiyan mode of debt management when you joined up with MMI?
Yeah, hold on, my cat just jumped in front of me. One of those unpredictable
They have
things that happen.
they have no idea how distracting they are. My dog is walking around in the background, but go ahead.
So with me, I kind of knew a lot already, because I had never been in debt before I was married. So it's basically, when you're married, it's a partnership, and when one partner is like spending, and I didn't keep. We had separate finances. We didn't have, so I didn't know how much she was spending until you know, when we started looking at how much we're spending, that's when we found out. So that for me was kind of a little bit asleep at the wheel. But there was a little bit of that stuff that you said where I couldn't apply it to myself, because by the time I needed to apply it to myself, I was too deep in debt.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you're not paying attention to something and then something happens and it's too late to change it. And so that's why I needed MMI help.
That's pretty amazing. That's a pretty huge admission. I really appreciate you, Mr. Mark, for saying that. Another question came up in the chat box, and I really want to lean on you, Miss Joanne, for this one. It says, what was your first success in the program? Maybe like, what were your milestones along your debt management journey? What did you feel like was your first like hoorah moment?
Probably paying off first $10,000 in debt.
That'll
And
do it.
yeah, that was a big thing for me, because I remember I was making minimum payments on my credit cards that had like 20% and over APR. So I was making minimum payments, but almost the same amount of money that was going in, paying that minimum amount. I paid off the 10K in such a short time.
Yeah.
So I hope y'all didn't hear my doorbell just went off. It's nobody out there. It's probably the Amazon guy. But
I thought maybe she was ringing a bell with everybody when she said that.
It's very interesting, all the buzzers that go off in this house in the most unexpected times. But Miss Joanne, I did hear you say paying off the first 10,000 was big for you. And what really stuck out to me is that I've had clients that don't look enough at their credit card statements to know, like, if you're making the minimum payment, and sometimes it's the same amount going out in interest of that new month. And so that's a really huge component along the debt management journey, is understanding the impact interest is having on keeping us in debt. Miss Jackie, I want to come to you. What was the first big milestone for you when you felt, oh, this is working?
When I noticed that, because I was periodically checking my balances because you can check your balances online with MMI. And I saw how the balance was coming down so fast. And I was like, I can feel the pressure just going off very slowly. And then when I made that last payment, that very last payment, the feeling is just, it's unreal. And then after that, you figure out how to navigate going forward from there. So now what I'm doing is, and this is something I think I talked about in the interview that I did for the TV station here. Because I moved here from Philadelphia to help take care of my parents. And when I moved here, I came here with no furniture, anything, and moved in with my sister. And what we did was we had to buy furniture. So I said to her, this is what we're going to do. We didn't have all the money up front to pay for the furniture, but what we did was I said, okay, we're going to find out how we can buy this furniture and get it interest-free and pay it off in that time period. And that's what we did. Everything that we bought, and since we've been here for the last 4 years, every piece of furniture that we have bought, everything we bought has been paid off within 4 to 6 months. And we do it interest-free. So we have
Don't it feel good?
Yeah. I find I always find anything that I want to purchase now, I find ways to pay it off very quickly so that I don't accumulate no credit card debt.
I think that is thank you for that, Ms. Jackie. And I think that is a perfect way to kind of wrap up the conversation. The beauty, I tell our clients here that I speak to, or when I am in training, so I'm also training counselors, but I tell them that the beauty of a debt management here at MMI is, yes, you're able to pay off your debt and pay it off in most, if not all cases, significantly faster than you would by paying the minimum balances. But in addition to that, you're able to build this muscle of paying stuff off. You know what that feels like going through a debt management plan. You know what it looks like, and you know what it's like to be debt free. And I would argue that probably being debt free is the biggest motivator to staying debt free.
Exactly.
I want to thank all of our panelists, Ms. Joanne, Ms. Jackie, Mr. Mark, and Mr. Juan. I think that it is amazing that not only you were able to complete your debt management plan, but that you've gone the next step in trying to get others to understand the importance of debt management and the services that we offer here at MMI. I really do appreciate your time this afternoon. Y'all are superhero. Y'all like the Avengers to me. So wear your cape proudly. And if you don't have a cape, I'll get you one.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm going to turn it back over to Miss Michelle. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to second everything that Jay had to say. Jackie, Joanne, Juan, Mark, your stories are just incredible. And sharing your insights and experiences. What I heard were themes that I have heard from our clients over and over through the years. You know, Jackie, you talked about it happened again, and that was embarrassing. The reality is life happens, and your life is not a financial transaction. There are a lot of financial transactions that happen throughout your life, but we make really good decisions sometimes that aren't helpful to our financial position. And that's okay, because there are a wide variety of factors to take into account when you're making decisions. But then understanding the impact of those and then saying, okay, so what's my next step to address this, I think is just really key. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And Joanne, you talking about how taking this step improved your ability to care for yourself in a host of other ways, I thought was just really important. You know, the mental impact of having debt that's challenging to overcome, the emotional impact of feeling like you have to hide a financial situation from people who also love and care about you, afraid of the reaction of others, and then what it can do for you once you do tell that story and once you do take the steps that you know are in your own best interest. Is just so powerful. And Juan, I heard that reflected in your story as well. You talked about, and we hear this a lot too, I'm a smart person. I make good money. Why am I in this situation? This is humiliating. And one of the things we talk about too is that just because you're an expert in one area doesn't mean you're an expert in every area. And that's okay. We reach out to professionals for support and help all the time for a host of issues, and managing your personal finances and getting really solid objective advice about what you can do to resolve an issue is just so incredibly helpful. And thank you for sharing that perspective. And And then Mark, one of the things I heard from you is something that we've also heard from our other clients, is that our counselors can be your toughest coach and your loudest cheerleader. That coach saying, what are you thinking? And that cheerleader who then says, but you've got this and we've got you. And there is a next step here. So I loved hearing your story and your journey and how life circumstances can change your debt levels and how you manage debt, how you think about finances, and then how you get back to a path, you know, if you've wandered astray a little, how you get back to a path that makes sense for you and everybody in your life. So just so powerful. Thank you so much. It was really impactful to hear those stories. And I think it just reinforced repeatedly how stigma and shame can influence so much of our lives and what we see as more broadly our family and our communities. But that the more we talk about these situations, the more we can get control of them, we can drop some of the self-imposed shame, and we can do things that are really good for ourselves and the people that we care about. You know, I'm really proud of the work that we do at MMI and know that financial counseling helps to give people the support they need, the tools they need, the education on the systems that helps put them on a path to full financial recovery. And I know that by having friends and family who are willing to talk with you and recommend these programs is a really important part of the solution. So thank you for that today. I know that there is so much good that can be done when we have the right support to overcome financial challenges, and we just have to work together to reduce these barriers. We at MMI, we're really proud to share our learnings. We are especially proud of our peer advocate program successes, and we hope that those of you out there listening will think about how your organization, or even just you personally, as a friend or a spouse, a sibling, or a neighbor, might help reduce the longstanding barriers of stigma and shame for those who are in debt or financial crisis. In closing, I'll just say, if you have any additional questions, or if you would like any additional information on how you or your organization can help address debt crisis stigma, you can visit our website, which also links out to some of the research that we talked about today. It's moneymanagement.org/influencer. And we would encourage you to consider engaging with our peer advocates to help improve the financial health of your communities. You can do that by emailing Thomas directly at thomas@moneymanagement.org. Thank you again to everybody who joined us today. A big thank you to our funders who helped make this work possible. I wish you all well. Now let's go and do some good in the world. Thank you.